interesting because I'm going to present to you a short snippet of insight from a multi-year research project which I'm running. I'm running 2 projects. We are not even 1 year into a 3-year project. But I was asked to come here, and I thought it would make sense to show you a glimpse of what we see on the topic of managing regulations and what are the conflicts and synergies involved in that. So actually in the research team, we came up with this metaphor of regulatory waves. I mean, not one wave, several waves working in different directions. And you know, there has been a lot of talk about tsunamis and avalanches and headwinds and stuff. But we said, well, this is not about a wave, it's about many multiple waves. So we had this as we actually have been writing some really boring academic text about this, but we think this is a good one. And then we were quite lucky because one very senior executive that we interviewed, he said this. So, you know, we have gone from a tsunami to a constant flow of smaller waves. Is that easier? No, it's even more difficult. So with that in mind, it's interesting to figure out how can companies act and what are they doing? So that's really what we have been researching in the initial stage of this research project. So I'm going to talk to you about 3 things. The first one is very shortly, what is this research project or the projects about? The second one, and this has been talked about a lot today, the setting, what is going on in terms of conflicts and synergies. And then, last but not least, share with you some initial findings from this project. So the key theme for the project is regulations and digitalization, an unexplored source for competitive advantage. And this has been, it seems quite attractive because we have gotten quite some good funding to do this research. And again, very briefly, I had a long career in the financial industry, working in and with the industry, but I'm now a full-time researcher, so I quit all my other jobs and I focus on academic research now. 3 themes here. How are regulations influencing firms? It might sound trivial and you might all know this, but to dig into that a little bit. The second one, evolution of RegTech. At least in the research world, RegTech is very new and very little is written about it. So there we have quite a lot to offer as contribution. I've been studying RegTech myself since 2017 actually, so I've been seeing what has been happening and been writing a little bit about it. And the third one again is regulations and digitalization. I mean, if firms are going to digitalize and be customer friendly and compete with challengers, how are you at the same time going to be compliant? You cannot do those things separately. You need to find ways maybe to exploit synergies. And this is also in the research world. There are some people over here doing research on innovation and digitalization, and somewhere probably here there are some regulatory researchers, so they are not really talking to each other. So we have taken a little bit the trying to force maybe connecting these 2 research areas, which has some challenges for us, but it's also exciting. And again, we have been really doing this project since mid last year, and we're going to do them until mid 2026. So, and again, they will result in some fairly boring academic publications, but they will also result in some really exciting managerial points of views and stuff like I'm doing now. I will know even more in 1 year then. So if we then the second point, the setting, well, this has been talked about quite a lot. These are a few examples, snippets from the dialogue. There's conflict here. I mean, if you want to be innovative and explore digitalization and be compliant, I mean, it's not some very positive words mentioned here. We talk about regulatory avalanche. Who wants to be in an avalanche? I wouldn't want to. Jamie Dimon of JP Morgan, he talks about assault. Doesn't sound fun either, to be assaulted by regulators. And The third one, the SEB CEO, Johan Torgeby, he talks about tsunami. And it's against dirty money, but of course it's against him as well and his firm for all the requirements he has to deal with. Up there we talk about regulatory headwinds, which doesn't sound, maybe if you're a sailor you like headwinds because you can go across them, but it seems not too good. And then Revolut talks about extreme bureaucracy. Happens to be here in the UK, but I think you can replace Britain there with almost any jurisdiction. So it's red, it's not very good. However, there are at least some hints of that there might be synergies. If you have an unstable system, you might not trust the vendors and the actors in the industry. There seems to be possibilities, at least someone says, that you can derive benefits from reporting requirements. And finally, I think an interesting case, which we have seen in our research, the cryptocurrency market. We interviewed a few people in that industry, and they were actually quite happy about what is called MiCA, the markets in cryptocurrencies regulation coming up, and CARF, which is also about the crypto assets. And they say, well, finally this makes us legitimate, and it makes us an industry, and we can passport our license across EU. So there could be something there, that there are benefits of regulation. So I will swiftly then move into my findings, or our findings. I have 4 findings, and then I have a bonus observation, and then I have I have a one-pager, which is like, since I have been a management consultant, I love these one-pagers, so I do that as a researcher as well, with these 5 areas of conflicts and synergies. But finding number 1 then, which I already said, and we heard it several times today, complexity moves beyond single regulations. It's both about the volume. I mean, you have so many regulations. We have done some work in the project. We have analyzed documents from 43 EU-centered regulations. I think that's 28,000 pages we have taken. And that's just a fraction, I guess, of what some of you that are regulated has to deal with. So, but it's also, and this was said in the last session here, this now affects, it did before, but even more now, different knowledge domains. I mean, it's not only no longer that the risk and compliance people can sit in a room. Now you need to have the chief information security officer, you need the IT architect, you need the data people, you need a whole lot of different professions talking and working together. And then there's also industry convergence. I mean, we talk about the financial industry, maybe mostly here today, but then you have the, let's say, the platform businesses, like the big tech providers. Are they to be regulated? Are they part of finance, Apple, Amazon, Google, etc.? Or where does the industry borders change? So that affects. And then behind that, we have data sources and data models. That was also said before somewhere that, well, this industry has one taxonomy and one data model and one standard. This industry has another one. So how do you map these data models? So on the data level, you also have challenges. The second one, also been mentioned several times today, silos and different perspectives. Again, we talked about professions. How do you get the legal people, the IT people, sales and procurement together in a room? I had this funny story about the DORA regulation, digital operations, which comes now. And this guy said, he was a business development manager. Well, you know, I'm involved in DORA, and we had this meeting where we booked this room. It was 10 seats, and then we had the usual suspects invited, but then we found out, oh, we need to invite the data architects as well, and there was no seats for them, so they had to stand in the corner. So that's sort of a physical illustration of how much people you need to deal with certain regulations. But then you also have the regulators and the regulator. Which perspectives do you have there? I mean, you clearly have different agendas and different objectives, but maybe you can agree on some things. So how do you collaborate? Also, the regulators are siloed. I mean, it's not everywhere that regulators talk together and agree on standards and terminologies. So it's in the firms, but it's also on the regulatory side. And finally, again, data collection and interpretation. If you get data from different silos from a lot of places, how do you get all of that together? How does the supply chain look for that data? The third finding, well, there is actually, and this is not me saying it, it's actually the respondents in our interviews that says, well, we think innovation and value creation may be derived from these regulatory requirements. There's customer insight. We know more about our customers and the dynamics, so we can create offerings. We can enter new industry segments by being compliant in one area. We can move into another area. One example was a payment provider, and they had a very good licensing process with the regulator, and then they wanted to move into the banking industry, and they needed a banking license. They were much quicker getting a license when they were already, let's say, on good. He said, we have a gold star with the regulator, so that's obviously good. And again, here comes data. You need data to do some analytics and create insights. So there you can be smart about data, I think. And then compliance as a passport. As I said, if you have a gold star, that can really influence what you can do getting other licenses. One question we still struggle with, I think, we work with is, what about barriers? I mean, there are clearly barriers of entry created by regulations because it's tough to become a regulated firm, and there's a lot of, I think someone has said that just to start a regulated company, you need like 20 people before you sell anything to a customer. That's of course tricky. But can there be back doors opened? Partly because you can solve some problems that maybe the incumbents or the existing companies can't. And here I think it's about data quality and transparency. How can you work with data? How can you share data with others? How can you use your data in new partnerships? It's interesting, I don't know if you know that, there was PSD2 a couple of years ago, the second Payment Services Directive in the EU. Now comes PSD3 and something called PSR, the Payment Services Regulation. Here you might open up for totally new business models. So there might be something there. So these are my 4 findings. Again, hot off the press, a little bit unstructured. But there's some tough calls to make. There's some difficulties, but there are also opportunities. Then I wanted to give you, this is like a bonus observation. If you want to know which are the regulations you should bet on as a RegTech, or which are the most important, and this is from our interview data. It's not me making this up. So here you have the top 10 list. You see, so there's a mix there. Of course, anti-money laundering, counter-terrorist financing comes number 1. And then GDPR, number 2. Both of these are like old, existing, quite complex regulations. But then DORA comes actually very high up. It's really on the table now for people, from the CEO to the IT architect. All people we have interviewed talk about DORA. And then the old MiFID II, of course, financial markets in financial instruments. And then we have the ESG, let's say, cluster. That's SFDR, sustainable finance, and it is sustainable, corporate sustainable reporting, CSRD, but there's a bunch of other ESG regulations, of course. And then there's some others, the old ones, you know, Solvency and Basel, which are, I guess, important. Maybe people don't talk about them because they are just business as usual nowadays. So AI Act, not top of the agenda, but starts to come there. And again, these are the 10 out of like probably 50 that we have on our list. So there's a long tail then also. So, but again, this is maybe where the money is, or at least where the attention is. So I thought it would be good to know that. So again, really my key then, my management consulting slide here is that, and this has been talked about again the whole day, I think it all starts with data. I mean, data is not technology. It's not just technology. It's a technical foundation, but it's also a strategic foundation. So here you need to work with data. And it's of course complex to manage data that is comprehensive and with high quality, but it can also be an accelerator for new business models. So that's the synergy conflict dimension there. This then leads to 3 areas which needs to be covered. I mean, technology, On the one hand, you have a legacy burden, which is quite tough to manage, but you also have emerging solutions here that can really accelerate. I think it's called RegTech or something, or someone said, that can manage compliance. In the middle, really central. I was thinking actually before I went here, and even more after today, collaboration in the middle there, graphically that should be bigger, because I think more and more here is about collaboration. And again, it's very complex to manage, both internal but also external collaboration with vendors and partners, and you have all these outsourcing requirements, etc. And but there are new partnerships that can emerge based on regulatory change. Customer relationships, could be difficult to manage, but you can also find increased protection and transparency. And finally, I would say the end result, this is a little bit of an academic term, industry architecture, but there could be changes to industry boundaries and who does what and how does value chains look like. So again, if you want to remember something, ingrain this picture in your brain and or take a photo of it. So very shortly to end up, some modest conclusions for, let's say, the buyers, the regulated firms. There are proactive movers, and we have examples of that in our data that can create new value. But most people are really stuck in some kind of reactive license to play. Compliance first, then maybe something else if we have time and money. And again, pointing to the central role of data. Data is really something that everybody needs to know about, from the CEO down to the operations and infrastructure architects. RegTechs, well, find ways to collaborate, and I guess with everybody and everywhere, because it will be difficult, I think, for many RegTechs to go there alone and to do their own thing. And this balance between legacy technology and architecture, know your place. Don't assume that you are the center of the universe. You seldom are. You may be a moon to Jupiter or the moon to the Earth. Take that into account when you sell something. And again, data. Have a good look at your approach to data and your potential client's approach to data. I think then you have a good chance. And then maybe you can end up surfing in the waves rather than being overwhelmed by the waves. So that was it from me. I think we have 1 minute and 40 seconds for questions, if anybody has one. No? Here is one, I think. Okay. Oh.
It's wonderful to see the amalgamation of different regulations. It's wonderful to see an amalgamation of regulations across a peaceful Europe. It's not quite like that. We're starting to get blocks of countries that are not cooperating, or they're doing espionage, and they're deliberately violating decency or laws. What advice or thoughts do you have on that?
Well, first of all, that's a very good observation. And this, when we ask these general questions in the project about, well, what are your thoughts? We ask people in the financial industry, actors on different levels, what are your thoughts on the regulatory evolution? Many people point to this, as you say, that the regulations have gone from being more of an administrative thing to be more of a geopolitical topic, and that as a firm there's a big challenge there to maneuver, because you don't know if you're responding to a political topic or if you're responding to a, let's say, regulatory compliance topic. And this has been brought up not only, it's not only within Europe, but also if you take into account the US, China, Asia, and also, the war in Ukraine and all of that. That boils down to, an example boils down to sanctions. How do you manage those? Who is sanctioned and why? So I think my only advice would be, to the regulated firms would be to I mean, look ahead and don't look here. Try to look here and try to foresee scenarios that you maybe didn't think about. I'm not sure if that answers the question, but it is it's tricky in a sense. So I don't think I have a really good answer.
Well, it's a shame. You know, that's the sad thing. Everybody here is collaborating, and I don't mean to take too much time. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.